Hello and welcome to Career Talk. And I'm Lee Hopwood. I'm the CEO here at the CCMA. And today I'm joined by Tracy Kellaway, who is the Executive Director, and I have to get this right, the Executive Director of Global Consumer Care Operations at Estee Lauder. Hello, Tracy.
Good morning. Oh, actually, good afternoon now. Yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it, that title? I keep thinking of ways to shorten it, but I haven't managed it yet.
But it kind of says what you do.
It does indeed. Yeah, it does.
It kind of says what you do. And what a brilliant brand to work for, Estee Lauder. And have I said that right?
Lauder.
Lauder.
Yes. But yeah, which is an umbrella company for so many other organisations. So underneath, or so many other brands, should I say. So underneath Estee Lauder are a host of other makeup and cosmetic and hair care and fragrance brands like Jo Malone and Bobbi Brown and MAC and so on and so forth. So yeah, a really, really great brand to work for. Super lucky.
I had no idea that Estee Lauder had so many brilliant brands in it as well.
I know, it's amazing. And you know, the absolute best thing about working for this fantastic company is that we actually have a shop in our office. So if ever you get to visit, there is a shop here where you can actually buy a selection of beautiful products.
Oh wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. And so the whole purpose of the next 30 minutes or so is I want to find out a little bit more about your career, a little bit more about where you started, what journey you've been on, and oh my goodness, what a journey you've been on. You've done everything. You've done sales, service. You've done different sectors from utilities to banking to retail. You've done risk, and it's going to be a fascinating journey that I think we're going to go on over the next 25-30 minutes. So first of all, though, what does working at Estee Lauder as the Executive Director of Global Consumer Care Operations
well done.
What does that mean? What do you do on a daily basis?
So this is a relatively new role for me, actually. So I've been in this role kind of officially since January, but only really sort of properly doing it, I guess, for the last sort of 3 or 4 months, because previous to that, I was director for consumer care for the UK. So basically, I ran the kind of UK customer care team for Estee Lauder and all of those brands that I mentioned earlier. What I do now is global operations. So the UK, I guess, was probably a little bit further ahead than some of our other regions globally in terms of where we were or are operationally. So this role is really all about kind of taking some of that best practice that we've developed and set up in the UK and rolling that out into all of the other regions. So they're all at sort of very different stages of their kind of consumer care evolution and journey. So I'm responsible really for our sort of strategic development roadmap, so the implementation of that and really getting everybody to the same point. So regardless of where you are in the world, if you're talking to one of our teams about one of our brands or one of our products, you're going to get the same service wherever that is in the world. And we've got all of the same kind of technology and infrastructure supporting that. So that's, you know, a really big part of what I'm kind of leading. And then I'm also responsible for sort of resource planning across the global footprint as well, and all of our vendor management as well. So it really is making sure that all of our regional teams have everything that they need to be the best that they can be.
And when you say other regions around the world, what are those other regions?
So we have the EMEA region. So we have a couple of centres in EMEA that look after all of our European countries. We also have our Asia Pacific region, which looks after, you know, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, etc., etc. And then we have our colleagues in North and South America. So it is literally right across all of those geographies and all of those time zones. So I do sleep, though. It's okay.
I was going to say, when you're in that kind of role, you've got to be, yeah, is it a 24/7?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think being in the UK it works really well because of where we are from a time zone perspective with sort of all of those other time zones. We kind of, you know, managed to cross with all of them at some point. So actually being in the UK is really that possibly a few years ago, this role maybe wouldn't have been done in the UK. It probably would have been very much a kind of North America based role because that's where our headquarters are. But actually, that's perhaps something that COVID and, you know, the changes to technology over the last few years have really enabled. So I feel quite lucky in that respect.
And I'm guessing that you are going to have the opportunity. I know you said you've been in the role since January. I'm guessing you're going to have the opportunity to do a little bit of travel.
Yes. So yeah, I hope so. So, I mean, I have always done a bit of travel anyway, being part of a global organization. It's just something that we've always done. But obviously the last couple of years, it's just, you know, curtailed that. But I'm actually off to Budapest next week, or the week after next, where we've got one of our hubs. I'm hoping to get back to New York later in the year. And then I'm very much hoping at some point to be able to travel out to Hong Kong to see our operation out there. But the rules out there around COVID are still quite strict, so that might take a little bit longer. But yes, I'm hopeful to be able to start traveling a bit more again.
So did you always work in contact centres, or where did your career start?
Well, do you know what? This makes me feel so old because they weren't actually called contact centres when I joined or when I started, because it was that long ago. It was literally 30 years ago. So
I can't believe that.
Well, oh, thank you. Pretty much, yes, I have. My very first job was actually in an estate agent, and I absolutely adored it. I have a real passion for property, and it's actually a bit of a sideline thing that I do, but it's a conversation for another day. But I started in an estate agency, but I didn't stay because there was a big recession at the time. It was a long time ago. It was in the late 80s, early 90s. And my parents were very keen that I got a job in a very sort of more stable environment. So I actually went to work for British Gas. And at the time, it was as a some kind of clerk, I think the title was, which just goes to show you how long ago it was. But actually, it was such a brilliant move. I remember going there and thinking, and I know that I've heard this on other career talks, but going there and thinking, I'll do this for as short amount of time as possible whilst I work out what else I want to do. But within the first kind of couple of years of being there, they went through a massive transformation. There was a lot of regulatory change. And as a result, the contact centre kind of environment was implemented into British Gas. So I was like right there at the beginning. I remember when they first put the wallboards up on the wall and everyone is like, what's that? Why does it say 98%? What does that mean? And, you know, things like that. And I basically got a kind of lucky break and got my first foray into sort of a management role, a leadership role. I got promoted to a team leader and I just loved it. I love the environment. I love the buzz. I love working with lots of people. And yeah, and I've just stayed in contact centres ever since. But it was interesting seeing the birth of a contact centre almost.
I love that. I love that. And so as a team leader, so we talk a little bit over the last couple of years, we've been talking about how the role of the team leader has changed. What was the role of the team leader for you nearly 30 years ago?
Honestly, I think I must have been a horrendous team leader. So I probably need to apologise to anybody who was team led by me. It was, I think, and I think partly some of this as well was perhaps the environment I was in, but it was very command and control. So I think in that first team leader role, it was very much about you tell people what to do. And that's what we did. And it took me a little while to realise that actually telling people what to do doesn't necessarily get the best out of them. But it was very much around making sure that work got done and that, you know, work was allocated and that people were logged on, and it was very, very what's the right word? Like I say, command and control. You know, it was very focused on, you know, adherence and you know, how many calls people did an hour and average handle time and things like that. So it's changed massively, I think, into the kind of, you know, the leader, the coach that we expect team leaders to be now, and, you know, the support person. It wasn't about that at all. It was very, very different.
Interesting. So 2 years as a team leader, and where did that take you? Because I mean, you're such a intelligent individual. I can only imagine that you took that and went, oh, actually, I can go somewhere with this.
I did, and I went and specialised in complaints for a while, and I actually went and worked in London for a while and did chairman's complaints, which I absolutely adored because it kind of gave me the opportunity to still be in a sort of management and leadership role and have a team, but also gave me the opportunity to really deep dive into some quite technical and complicated complaints and use my kind of blue side, I guess, if you like, and my sort of analytical and problem solving skills. And I absolutely adored that role. But from there, I then went into kind of like process management and continuous improvement role. I think probably with the complaints piece being a bit of a springboard for that, because obviously when you're looking at lots of complaints, you start to see trends and you start to see opportunities, etc. And so I then moved into a process improvement role and actually moved in a sort of sales environment, and did that pretty much for the rest of my time at British Gas, and did some kind of, at the time, groundbreaking things about bringing in, the opportunity to sell something over the phone, which brought all sorts of regulations and things with it. And so I did quite a bit of travel within the UK, but within that role as well. And that was actually probably, I guess, why I decided to make the move, because I did quite a lot of travelling up to London, to Cardiff, to Birmingham, to Manchester, to Leeds. And after about 3 or 4 years of travelling, I thought, actually, I'm quite tired of travelling. It's maybe time to, do something a bit closer to home. So I decided it was time to leave. So I actually took voluntary redundancy, which was something that was quite a common thing, I think, in the regulated industries at the time. So I took voluntary redundancy and decided to do a bit of kind of contracting and just test the water, really, and see what was out there. And actually, I didn't like it at all. Yeah, I found it really, really quite difficult. I think, having been part of an organisation for such a long time, and being quite institutionalised and also in a very regulated environment, that going into so many different environments and having to pick up the culture and everything very, very quickly, I did find quite challenging. But it was a really, really great insight into so many other industries and so many other cultures, that I think it really helped me to establish myself as a leader and think about, what's important to me from a cultural point of view, what's important to me for the, the places that I work. And actually, I ended up staying at an organisation that I'd originally started contracting for. I ended up working with them. There was sort of a financial services and banking environment, and I ended up staying there for about 18 months, I think. But within that time, actually had my son. So then everything changed again, as these things often do.
And I want to ask you about that. I do want to ask about working in a contact centre and then having children. I do want to come back to that. But you talked there about being in complaints, being in continuous improvement, going out and doing some consultancy work. Do you think that having those experiences and having, the opportunity to do those things, but having those experiences really helped you with regard to progressing your career further?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I expanded my network of contacts. I worked in so many different, kind of verticals. I just got exposure to so many things and was able to do what I guess consultants do so well, which is take great ideas from different organizations and, implement them. It just gave me that kind of breadth, I guess. And also the opportunity to work with so many different people, and I guess the start of working in some different cultures, because I'd worked very much for, a very British company, and then I started to work with a French company, and then I worked with a US company. And so it just, I guess broadened my horizons and made me think so much wider than what I had been doing, albeit I'd had lots of different roles at British Gas. I had only worked really for them. So it was probably, when I look back at it now, I think actually it was quite a brave move to leave, but it didn't feel like a brave move at the time. It just felt like it was, the next evolution. But I think once I had left, I realised, oh gosh, that was quite a brave move, because this is really quite different to what I'm used to.
So you then had a child.
I did.
You were working in a contact centre in a management role.
Yes.
Tell us how, I mean, that, and I'd love to say that's only a couple of years ago, but I know it's a little bit longer ago than that.
Indeed.
Tell us a little bit more about that and how, what you went through and yeah, maybe reflecting on how things have changed a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a really large call center or contact center that I was working in there. I say, well, large for me, it was 250 seats. It was sales and service, and it was, you know, it was a big role. And
you were you managing the whole contact center?
Yes, yeah. So I was head of that center. And then, yes, I fell pregnant with my son, who is 21 next month. Happy birthday, Elliot. And I worked throughout my pregnancy right up to the end, and had expected to go back, and had at the time expected to go back full time. However, as anybody who's had a child knows, that once you've had a child, actually think lots of things change. It's practically can be quite challenging, and it wasn't. Although it was localish to me, it wasn't just sort of, you know, a few minutes down the road. It was still probably sort of 45 minutes, 50 minutes journey. And so I realised, after I had relatively short mat leave at the time, I think it was only about 3 months, and I realised that actually it would work really well for me if I could maybe do sort of condensed hours. So I only had to commute on 4 days of the week, and we didn't have the opportunity to do home working or anything then. So I wanted to go back in a 4-day-a-week capacity, and it was previously I'd worked 5 days a week, but it was a 24-hour contact centre, so I wasn't there all the time anyway, because obviously I couldn't be. And unfortunately for me, they weren't able to support that. And to cut a very long story short, as a result of them not being able to support that request, I actually ended up leaving. And I went to work.
It's hard. So 20 years ago, there wasn't the legal support around you, where as a parent, you could legally ask for a more flexible working like you have today. So it was, very difficult.
It really was down to, you know, the organisation's kind of discretion, I guess. And, you know, they felt it wasn't possible for me to be an effective leader, you know, in 4 days. And obviously I had no option but to, I guess, you know, accept that. But no, you're absolutely right. And in fact, one of the conversations I had at the time was where they suggested that maybe I took a step back in my career, and you know, which it wasn't something that I wanted to do either. So, you know, I kind of talk about this now, and not because I want to criticize anyone. I just want to highlight, I guess, that, you know, things have changed quite dramatically, and, you know, it is possible to balance those things with support from your organization, and obviously with support from, you know, the network that you've kind of got around you. But yes, things have changed a lot. But on the flip side of it, I think everything does happen for a reason. And I had a fantastic time there. I absolutely loved working there. But as a result, I ended up actually getting a role at Aviva, which was literally like 2 miles from where I lived. So from a kind of, you know, practical point of view, was so much better. And I had an amazing time. I worked at Aviva for 8 years, I think. Did loads of different roles, got so many different opportunities.
What did you do?
Well, I actually went in to be an operations manager, but within that time, the time that I was there, I also worked in risk and compliance for about 3 years. I worked in financial crime. I worked in claims. I did so many different things, and got the opportunity, I guess, to really get under the skin of some of the nitty-gritties of financial services that I hadn't experienced before. And I think being in a risk and compliance role was, again, it kind of talked to the blue in me, I think, and gave me that, you know, sort of analytical and slightly, you know, technical aspect of things that I absolutely loved. I got to work with, you know, people in legal. I got to work with people in our product development teams, for example, and just exposure to probably to areas of the business that I perhaps wouldn't have done, and probably exposure to people that I probably wouldn't have had exposure to if I hadn't have been, you know, sitting in certain meetings, ensuring that, you know, governance was talked about and risks were talked about and documented, and that we had appropriate plans in place, etc. So it wasn't probably an area that I decided I wanted to stay in long term, but I would say it was one of the most valuable experiences of my career in terms of understanding about business and, you know, understanding about finance and just some of the things that make, you know, businesses tick and that are super, super important. So, yeah.
I think that's something that Kate and I talk about on the academy side of the CCMA, and is that being able to, and something we're looking to develop, enable contact centre managers, contact centre heads of, that want to develop and progress and grow, getting that broader understanding of how business works, understanding, you know, finance for non-financers, you know, understanding marketing, understanding, you know, the supply chain, understanding all of those other aspects. I think you're right, it does give you that grounding that enables you to make some of those decisions easier.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So, and we partnered as well quite heavily with our procurement teams, and because it was kind of medical insurance that we were involved in at the time, loads of exposure to hospitals, and, you know, just a whole kind of world of things that you wouldn't think when you think of an insurance company that you would necessarily kind of get involved in. But yeah, it was fascinating. I loved working there, I have to say. Got some, you know, still in touch with lots of colleagues from there. But I had an approach from Estee Lauder companies that I just couldn't quite turn down. The lure, I think, of the world of beauty after sort of utilities and financial services and risk and governance, it was just too much. But that was a really interesting change as well, because
I was going to say that's got to be a really fascinating change to go from, as you say, those industries you've just said into retail and into beauty, and your current employer clearly saw what you had done and the challenges you'd been through, and thought, you know what, this person is going to be brilliant for us.
You know, I was really lucky, and the person that recruited me did say to me at the time that, you know, it was your leadership qualities and your experience that attracted us, because actually on paper your businesses that you've been in are not aligned to our organization at all, but from a customer service point of view and from a, you know, contact center point of view, that's what really, really kind of attracted us. And so I was really lucky, and I probably, again, didn't realize how lucky I was until a bit later on, once I got in and realized, actually, gosh, retail's quite complicated. I thought it was really, really simple, but there's, like, you know, it's quite different. And there are lots of different stakeholders. And also with this being a global organization, it's, you know, it's very, very complex. And yeah, I probably sort of came in quite naively thinking, you know, I've got this lovely little contact center in Hampshire, and it's all going to be very, you know, nice and neat and quite straightforward. And it was anything but. But I'm ever grateful to him for bringing me in and giving me that opportunity. And I guess seeing past that, because I think a lot of people that were involved in the recruitment process for that role at the time really wanted somebody that had a lot of retail experience or prestige type, you know, luxury experience, which, you know, I didn't have at all. So I was lucky they took a hammer on me, and that was 7 years ago, and I'm still here. So,
oh my goodness! And your career has progressed since you joined Estee Lauder as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with, you know, actually a relatively small team here, but that was part of, I guess, you know, what the plan was to bring me in was to expand it very much, and, you know, I guess put it on the map, and most fundamentally, I guess, kind of bring it up to date, because it was really quite behind from a technology point of view and from a setup point of view. And so I spent probably 3 or 4 years doing sort of quite a lot of modernization and just bringing in some of the kind of basic cadence that you'd expect to have in place. And then because of that, then got involved in working with some of our counterparts, setting up centres in other parts of the world, in EMEA, etc. And then the kind of whole global thing sort of took off as well. So yeah, the role has just really continued to expand and expand, and then, say, sort of changed completely, or, you know, expanded completely at the beginning of this year. So yeah, it's been great. I love it.
And it's been, I mean, it's a fascinating path that you've been on. What in that time has been your greatest achievement?
I think there's a couple, but I would probably say my first, there's two. I'm going to have two. The first one was definitely getting that first team leader role, because I think if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have, ended up going on that kind of career path, and maybe would have even ended up going back into a estate agency. Who knows? But I think the other one would probably be the COVID piece, because and I'm sure other people have said this, but honestly, pivoting and like literally spinning on our heads in a single day and going to work from home was massive. And actually, there were some things that we had done in advance without knowing about COVID that actually enabled us to literally switch overnight with no impact to our consumers at all. So I really think that, going from sitting in an office with 100 people outside my door to being at home and managing remotely definitely feels like a massive achievement.
And what's your view, your personal view now, with offices now opening up, people are coming back into the office, mindful of your experience of the need for flexible working? What's your personal view now? What would you like to see Estee Lauder and maybe other contact centres doing as a standard going forward?
Yeah, I think, there absolutely, for me, is a place for contact centres that are physical locations where people can go and collaborate. But I do think that hybrid is, it gives the best of both worlds. And I think providing that that's done in a way that enables individuals to make choices rather than kind of forced, you must be in on this day, and this day. I think for me, that's, that is the best of both worlds. I mean, I'm in the office today and I love it. I just feel like I'm at work when I'm in the office. And it's so great to see people, even though I see them, the same people, it's so great to actually, be able to stop and have a chat next to someone's desk. And I don't think you can underestimate the importance of those kind of interactions.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love it when we at the CCMA get together. It's so lovely to get together and see each other in person, and there's so much more body language that you see. So no, I'm with you. I'm curious, because you're going to have met a lot of people along the way, and no doubt you've worked with some amazing leaders. What's the best advice that you've ever received?
I think the best advice is, and I would give this advice too, is trust your gut. There's been so many times in my career and in my personal life as well, where I've maybe listened to other people, or I've listened to, what I think I should do when my gut is actually telling me to do something else. So I would say, always go with your gut. And I think, even if you feel like you do something and it maybe isn't the right thing, or it doesn't, like I said about when I went contracting and I wasn't sure if I liked it, it actually still helped to shape me and still helped me to understand, what I do like, what I don't like, what's important to me from a values perspective, what environments I maybe don't want to work in, or, what environments, what types of people, what cultures, etc. I do. So yeah, definitely trust your gut, but don't beat yourself up if you don't make the right decision, or you think you don't make the right decision, because things always have a way of working themselves out.
And arguably, you've described two scenarios where one taking volunteer redundancy, and you can imagine people going through that today, going, "Oh, I'm going to take it. I'm not quite sure what the future is going to hold," and that's okay. And similarly, where you decided that you needed to part ways with an organisation because you weren't getting the flexibility. There will be people, no doubt, that will be feeling similar today, that actually that job isn't, they love the job, but maybe there's something that just isn't quite working for them. And actually, who knows what the future might bring. So I think there's, I'm hoping you can still see and hear me. We are really, really nearly at time. And there's
I lost you then, Lee. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I thought you had.
Sorry.
We're really nearly at time, and I mean, there's so many other questions I want to ask you, and I am going to ask you one. What do you wish that you'd learnt earlier?
I think I wish I had learned earlier, and it comes back to what I was saying about that team leader role, that actually you achieve so much more with other people and collaboration than you do on your own or just telling people what to do. So yeah, I learned that definitely the hard way early in my career. And there are definitely times now where I have to remind myself of that when I'm off running and I suddenly think, hang on, have I brought everybody with me? But yeah, I definitely think that you achieve so much more in a group than you do on your own.
No, I love that. I really love that. And I'm going to ask you another one. Sorry, I am going to ask you some quick fire questions as well. But I'm really interested in your views. What do you think is the key to a successful career?
I think probably don't be afraid to take chances. Maybe take that move that's not perhaps that obvious, move sideways, try and say yes to as many things as you possibly can, because you never know where they'll lead or what experiences they'll give you.
That's great advice. Say yes when you can. Do you know what, people? I'm so aware that people think that other people are lucky. Oh, they're lucky because they got into that role. They're lucky because they are able to do this. And actually, maybe it's the decision making along the way. And taking every opportunity.
Take that chance.
Taking that chance. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, what's your favourite breakfast?
Eggs. Always eggs.
Eggs. How many? 2.
Normally scrambled. But if I'm feeling naughty, I might fry them.
What would you have with your scrambled eggs?
Normally a bagel.
Oh, very nice. What might I have these for my scrambled eggs? So, would you prefer to travel to the past or to the future?
Definitely to the past. I'd really like to go back to Victorian era.
Oh, really? Why?
Yeah.
What?
I don't know. It just fascinates me. It just, whenever I see or, experience anything or go and look at any, historical houses and things like that, I just feel like maybe perhaps I existed then. Who knows? But yeah, I'd love to go back to the Victorian times.
Fascinating. And so I was going to say Victorian times makes me think regal. We've got a big weekend coming up. What is your go-to pastime? And I think I might know what it is based on what you said earlier in the conversation.
Well, yeah, that is one of them. So yeah, definitely the whole property piece. But if I'm not doing that, then I am normally either at the gym or walking my dog.
Love. And what dog have you got?
I have a Labrador called Willow.
Oh, lovely.
A chocolate Labrador.
Chocolate lab.
Yes.
And amazingly, we've not been disturbed by dogs today.
No.
He likes to come in and join in the conversation, so this is all good. And one last question for you. What would you like to spend more time doing?
Sleeping. Always sleeping.
I love that, sleeping.
There's never enough sleep in a day for me. I could sleep for hours.
There's just not enough hours in the day.
But not at work. Clearly, I don't want to sleep at work. But yeah, I would love to do more sleeping.
I love that. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been brilliant hearing your career and your advice. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been like a fun interview. So thank you.
I'm glad it's been like a fun interview. Anyway, thank you so much, Tracy. And I'm going to be back in a couple of weeks when I'm going to be talking to Rula. And Rula Samara she's recently been promoted, and she's very heavily pregnant. So really quite interesting when I think about the conversation that you and I have just had, Tracy. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.